Okay. So, let's start this. So, my name is Alex Scott. I'm going to be interviewing my mom. Her name is Claudia Scott. So say hi.
Hi.
Cool. So basically you have to begin by establishing the interviewer's demographic details. So, of course, what is your age, if you want to disclose that?
I am 49.
Nice. What's your occupation?
I work full-time for United Healthcare. I'm a community health worker.
Cool. And then what's your highest education level?
A bachelor's degree.
Bachelor's degree? Where'd you go to college?
Arizona State University.
Okay. Kind of lame. Relationship status with me.
I am married.
No. What's your relationship status with me?
Oh, you're my son.
Okay, cool. How many children do you have?
2.
Okay, cool. What's your other son's name?
His name is Marshall.
All right, cool. So what's your racial and ethnic background, okay?
I am Mexican, Hispanic, Latino.
That's it, right?
That
Okay. So why I'm interviewing my mom is because I'm the person number 3, so I'm the third member, which means I have to interview another distinct demographic group. So my mom is fully Mexican, and my dad is white. That's why I'm half Mexican, half white, but my mom is fully Mexican, so that's why. What's your religion, if you have one?
I was born Catholic, but I would say that now I'm just Christian.
Okay, cool. Okay. So we're gonna move on to now talking about work. So I need to have 20 minutes, like I said, and so make sure you give like good descriptions of like your work. So how many hours per day / week do you work, basically? How many hours per day? Let's start off with that. How many hours per day do you work?
I work 8 hours per day at my main job, and then I also have a side business, so I would say I spend about an hour or 2 a day on my side business.
Okay. An hour or 2 per day on your side business plus 8 hours of actual work.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then, of course, per week, you work what days?
I work Monday through Friday for 8 hours a day at my main job, community health worker. And then I spend about 10 to 12 hours a week working on my side business.
Okay, cool. Let's see here. So besides work, how many hours per day do you spend on domestic tasks? So stuff you have to do around the house, or like go get or something. Maybe cooking.
I would say maybe about an hour.
An hour? A
Yeah.
day? You're not sure it's more than that?
Yeah.
Why would that be?
Well, because I work from home, so I am here, so I'm usually able to do a lot of things while I'm home, even though I'm working. Because I'm on the phone, I can still walk around my house and do things.
So let's talk about your work a little bit more. So can you describe what you do as a health worker? Starting off as a health worker.
Sure. So my job as a community health worker, I work for an insurance company, and my job is to talk to patients to improve their health care. And so that we focus on is patients that have chronic illnesses. So the patients that I am responsible for are the patients that have heart failure, sickle cell disease, end-stage renal disease, cancer, if they have diabetes, diabetes, or if they have a neurological disorder like a seizure disorder or something like that. And so what happens is when those patients are in the hospital a lot, the insurance company wants us to reach out to them to see what we can do to intervene, see if there's any social, economic reasons why they keep going back to the hospital. And basically it's a cost containment measure, because if we can intervene and we can help people see their doctor, get in to make an appointment, or assist them with housing, or assist them with obtaining food, they're more likely to stay healthy. And so keeping people connected to those resources that are out in the community to help them lead healthier lives.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense. That's probably why you spend a lot of time throughout the day. I mean, you must have a lot of patients, correct?
Yes, I have 120 patients that I'm working on.
Wow, that's a lot. Some would say that's too much.
It's a lot.
Okay, so if we talk about your other job, the one that you work on for like an hour a day, or 2 hours, could you describe that job and why you spend less time on it, more so?
Sure. So my other job is I'm an entrepreneur, business owner. I've owned a company for 15 years. It's called ABCs of CPR Training. We offer CPR training to the community because there's a lack of CPR instructors that are available to teach in Spanish, and we have such a large Spanish-speaking population in Phoenix that needs CPR training, that I have really found my niche in that market. So that is something that I focus on in offering those kind of classes to that particular community segment.
Okay, cool. Makes sense. So let's move back to domestic tax. So could you describe? Actually, no, we'll do that later. Let's move on to how much leisure time do you typically have during the day? So not working on like miscellaneous tasks instead of just like doing fun stuff like reading, watching TV. How much time in a single day do you have usually for that?
For leisure time, I would say 2 to 3 hours a day.
2 to 3 hours a day. That's good. Cool. And then, of course, because you work Monday through Friday, and then I guess the entire week with your other side job, it's more on the weekends when you're able to have that leisure time, right?
Yes, lots more leisure time on the weekends. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Okay. So now let's talk about your leisure time in general. So, let's start off by saying how would you spend your leisure time throughout Monday through Friday when you do have those 3 hours?
I would say oftentimes that time can be spent watching TV, relaxing with my husband, sometimes read a book, sometimes doing some domestic chores like throwing in a load of laundry, or if I have to run to the store, that's when I have time to do that, or if I have to go to the bank, then that's when I do that.
Okay. Do you feel that because I was your last kid to go to college, you have more leisure time now, or do you feel like you have less?
More. Definitely more.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. Do you enjoy that time?
Yes. I enjoy it very much.
Good. So you said you spend your leisure time with your husband. Who is that?
My husband is Steve Scott.
Steve Scott. Nice, my dad. Cool. So instead of just Dad, or Steve Scott, who else do you spend your leisure time with? Let's talk about weekends now, let's say.
Okay. So typically on the weekends, if we have events that we will go to, or sometimes we'll have get-togethers with other people. Sometimes we will spend this coming weekend. We're spending some time volunteering at a marching band competition. We'll go to dinner. Sometimes we'll meet other people and go to dinner. We'll go to the movies. Relaxing at home or going swimming, things like that.
What would you say that's your favorite leisure activity?
My favorite leisure activity is really going out to dinner with your dad, or having friends over and just relaxing in the backyard.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. Let's see here. So we're about at 11 minutes now, so we need around 20 minutes, okay? So we might have to go back through some stuff and kind of go deeper into it. But let's move on to now. So what would be something that would constrain your leisure time personally? So what's something that makes it so that you cannot have leisure time? I'll give you an example, like your work.
Okay, well, for me, I feel like I could always be working because I own my own business. I should always be doing research or doing something that's going to move my business forward. So any time of the day or night, I could be checking emails, sending emails, doing research on how to open up more markets or more lines of business, or coming up with new strategies for sales and marketing. So that's one of the things that you have to balance, I guess, is trying to decide how much leisure time should I have, and how much of that leisure time should be spent in trying to really move the business forward.
Okay.
And really, now that you're gone, I feel like I have more time and I should be moving the business forward more. So that is something that I probably need to reevaluate.
Okay, that makes sense. So, so what I was going to ask, which you touched on, is because I left, I'm sure when I was there was many constraints for leisure time. So let's talk about when I was at home. What were some constraints that made it so that you couldn't do your own thing? Or maybe you do consider being at something like an event for me a leisure time activity. So what would you consider being a constraint to a leisure time activity because of me, and what would you consider being a leisure time activity by yourself?
Well, I would say that some of the constraints of not being able to have as much leisure time is making a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and like constantly making bean burritos and food. Like that took up a lot of my time, is just feeding you.
Do you cook less now?
For sure.
You cook a lot less?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we'll make dinner, but it's not like it used to be all the time. Sometimes we'll just order food or go eat out or whatever. But another thing that I think that was the constraint is that we spent a lot of time volunteering at your school. And when you were here all of last year, I think we spent countless hours volunteering.
Yeah, quite a bit.
That's different now that we're not doing that anymore.
I'm sure.
Going to your teams, going to your events, and all those things.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what I was looking for. My activities for sure took up a lot of time, but would you consider them some of them leisure activities, like going to see like a game, like a soccer game of mine?
I suppose you could say that, yeah. I mean, it's a good use of your leisure time is going to support your child.
Yeah, I would think so. And then there's also other stuff like volunteering for my activities. That would definitely be constraints to what you want to do because you're just trying to help out, right?
Right, for sure.
Of course. All right, so let's talk about now when we have constraints in like the entire world. So if you think of somebody of you did say that you're Mexican, so what would be like an idea of a constraint for somebody who is the same race as you, basically, or ethnic
Well, I think.
background?
And are you talking about people that live in the United States that are Mexican, or people that live in Mexico?
United States.
In the United States?
Yeah.
And the question is, like, how do they spend their leisure activities or their leisure time?
How would they be constrained to not be able to do their leisure activities? It's not a
I
question.
see. Well, I think oftentimes it's work. I mean, that goes for everybody, but Mexican people, I think, are very proud, hardworking people, and they probably spend a lot of hours at work and commuting.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that makes total sense. I'm sure that's for a lot of people, not just generally
Right.
Mexican people. That's why it's
Right.
kind of a tough question. That's why it's kind of more broad into ethnic background instead of just like one race.
Right.
Okay, so so was any of this wait, hold on. So let's talk about this. So this question is basically, because this may constitute as a learning experience for your interviewees as well as yourself, be sure to ask your interview at the conclusion of the interview what, if anything, was relevant to him or her as a result of your conversation. So has anything been kind of relevant in like the present right now where you haven't had as much leisure time, or it maybe something's been constrained, or maybe something has been enabled that have allowed you to have leisure time?
Well, it makes me really reevaluate what we're doing with our leisure time, because there isn't a lot of time for leisure. And so when there is leisure time, you want to make sure that you are using it in a way that's really going to either relax you or build up your mind in some way,
Or your body.
Or your body, or better prepare you for the next day. So I think that is something that needs to be looked at again, possibly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad that you took that away. That's good.
Good question.
So now let's talk about like if somebody lives in Mexico, how would their leisure time differ to somebody who's Mexican lives in America?
That's a really good question. I think that when people live in Mexico, it's very different culturally. People spend a lot more time with family, visiting at each other's homes. So I think, like many Mexican people, whenever they do have leisure time, they're going to be spending it going to their relative's house, eating food with their relatives, like sitting outside and talking. There's just a lot more of that in the Mexican culture, where people do associate more with their neighbors. They go out in the evenings, they walk around the neighborhood and stop and talk to people. It's much more social. So in the United States, oftentimes it feels like people are much more isolated, maybe because they just don't live as close to the grandparents and extended family. But for whatever reason, it seems like in Mexico that people are much more likely to spend their leisure time, especially on the weekends, doing family things and family events and spending time with their extended family.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So would you say they have the same amount of leisure time as somebody who lives in America? Or would they have more because they're trying to work? What's the work like compared to America?
I think Americans actually actually work more. I think that there is a stronger emphasis on working in America, and I think like there's a saying in Mexico in Spanish that American people live to work and Mexican people work to live.
That's a great quote, and I'm definitely going to use that in my paper. Wow, that's a great quote. Great job. Okay, I think we covered everything, and we just passed the 20-minute mark. So, do you have any closing thoughts or something?
Thank you very much for the interview. I appreciate it. Can you talk to your daddy now?
Hi, Dad.
Hi, how are you?